All right, so I'm so excited to finally put the So Sweet Puzzle Mystery Quilt together. This is the small puzzle mystery quilt in the apple cider colorway. So I'm going to just work through this pattern, and for step one, we're going to be taking sections 3A, so from clue 3, this is block A, and I have 2 of them, and join it with the block from clue 8 that is the A block in clue 8. So these blocks here. So you can kind of see the orientation of them. I'm going to put them right sides together and sew a 1/4 inch seam, and then I'll press them per the pattern as well. And then it looks like we're going to be joining them together into a larger square. So I'm going to get these sewn and pressed and joined into that larger square, and then we'll take a look at step 3. Oh my goodness, just look at these gorgeous colors popping through here. I could just make this block over and over again with these colors. It's just gorgeous. All right, but we have to move on and see how this all turns out. So in step 3, you are going to take your 2 block 6s, so from clue 6, so your blocks are going to look like this in your colorway, and you're going to turn it so that that triangle from your F fabric is pointing out to the side. And you're going to do this on both sides of the block you just finished. So you can see here I have the other block 6, and that's going to go on the other side. So I'm going to put the right side on first. So I'm going to just put it right sides together and put a few pins in, and then make sure that you're following the pressing instructions on all of these after you sew. So for this block, the seams are going to get pressed out, so toward the block 6s. So I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam, and I'm going to do the same along the other side. I'm going to actually go ahead and get it ready now. Just make sure you don't catch the block in any of the seams on the other side. If you feel more comfortable doing it one at a time, just, surely do that. Now, after getting this sewn, I will show it to you, but at this point, we're going to be setting this to the side after we get these seams sewn and pressed, and we're going to be moving on to some other steps. All right, so for step 4, you're going to need 4 of your clue 5 blocks and 4 of your clue 9 blocks. And I'm just going to be sewing these together just like this in that orientation. Okay, so you're going to be sewing your 9 right to the 5. And we'll make 4 of these. So just fold them right sides together. And if it helps, you can put a few pins in just to make sure everything stays lined up. And the nice thing is if along the way you've been making sure that you press your seams just as the diagrams show in your clues, everything should line up pretty nicely. So I'm going to get all of these prepped, and also right along the seam, and we're going to be pressing the seam to the 9 block side. Now that we've made 4 of the step 4 blocks, you're going to take 2 and put them on the left side of our block from clue 1, and then you're going to rotate 2 of them. So this would be how your block looks with block 9 and block 5. So you're going to rotate it and put it on the right side of the number 1 block. So here's how they will look coming together. And then one at a time, you're going to fold a block 1 onto that combination block and put some pins in and sew a 1/4 inch seam, and you'll attach the other side in the same manner, put some pins and sew a 1/4 inch seam, and you're going to be doing that twice. See, there are 2 sets of this combination. All right, so now we have 2 of those strips that we just made and that first middle strip. So we're just going to be sewing the 2 strips we made onto either side of the first strip. So that first strip has the X in the middle. And how we'll know that we're sewing this on correctly is we have this little triangle here that are our F fabrics. That's going to go on the outside. So as long as that is facing away from that middle strip, you'll know that you're sewing this on correctly. So I'm going to pin this strip to the middle and sew a 1/4 inch seam, and then also be sewing the other one onto the other side. All right, so here is the center of the quilt so far. It is looking really good. I love these colors. All right, so now you're going to need a few pieces from your final package. We're going to be sewing on borders, inner borders onto the quilt. So you'll have some strips inside of your newest package, and you'll have 4 of your color A and then 4 cornerstones, and this is your color F. So what you'll want to do is measure your quilt top and trim your strips so that they fit exactly across the length of your quilt. You're going to sew 1 onto each side of your quilt, so your left and right side, and then along 2 of your strips after you've trimmed it, you'll put a cornerstone on each end of 2 of them, and then sew 1 of those onto the top and the bottom of the quilt. And then we'll have the final border of this quilt. So we'll have a few more blocks to piece together, and then we'll have the final quilt top. So I'm excited to see it all come together. What about you? All right, so now that I have my inner border put on, I do want to point something out to you. When you are working with strips like this, and if you've noticed in the past that your quilt turns out kind of wonky, it's not a perfect square or rectangle, one side is longer than the other, something you could really do to help that is, like I had said before, measure your quilt top and then cut your border to fit that. And I like to pin a lot to make sure that it stays in place. I did notice when I was sewing on one side that it didn't feel like the border piece was going to fit. And so I really pinned really well and manipulated it to work this strip into place. And that'll really help make sure that your quilt is nice and square and stays nice and square, because this is fabric. It can stretch a little bit, it can get out of place. So if you are having that trouble, taking the time to pin and really work it into place with all the strips being the correct size will really help keep your quilt in shape. All right, so now we have some more sections to add on to this quilt. It's going to get a little bigger. So we're going to be using a lot of different pieces for this section of the quilt. So we're going to be using these squares that are from Clue 4, and this is block 4A, and we'll have 2 of those. Now, because these are going to go, after they're all sewed together, it's going to be the top and bottom of the quilt. So that is why we are sewing 2 sets of these together. Now this is from Clue 2, and it is block 2A. This is from Clue 7 and it is block 7A. And then finally we have from Clue 8, we have block 8B. And so this is the pattern that they are going to go in. So the orientation I'm following from the pattern, so you can kind of see. So they're all going to get sewn together just as they are shown here. So what I'm going to do is place the two on the end here, right sides together, and put some pins in. So those two, and then I'm gonna fold these first two together, right sides together, and put some pins in. And then I'll do the same for the second set down here as well. And after I sew these 2 1/4-inch seams, I'm going to then put them together in this middle area and sew them as well. And then I'll sew these strips onto the top and bottom of the quilt and press. So I will show you that when we get there. All right, after attaching the top and bottom outer border, I am going to start on step 11 where I'm joining together quite a few of these thinner strips. So I'm going to work through them in order. I can't fit them all on screen at the same time. So first we're going to be using from Clue 7. This is block 7B. So there's how mine looks in my colorway. And this part that kind of has the patch here is going to be at the end, and then that is going to be attached onto from Clue 2, block 2B. And remember, we have 2 of these, each of these strips, because we're going to be making 2 border strips for the right and left side of the quilt. So this block 2B is going to be attached right sides together to the 7B block. And then we have block 4B. That is kind of a mirror image of the one right next to it. We have 2 of these. And this is from Clue 4. It's block 4B. And then at the end here, we have a mirror image of that first strip. This is block 3B, so from Clue 3. So that is going to be attached right sides together to the square here. So I'm going to get them all pinned together. We're going to be making 2 long strips that will be attached to the right and left side of the quilt. Then after that, I'm going to press them. These will be sewn onto the side of the quilt, and we'll be putting border strips on after that. That'll be the last part, and this is the colorway for my border strips. So I'm going to prep these, attach them to the side of the quilt, then I'll show you how it looks all finished with the border strips attached. So the border strips, I'm going to attach just like with the inner border strips. I'm going to measure the quilt to make sure the strips are the correct length before attaching them. So if you attach them on without trimming them, you can kind of let your quilt get a little wonky and not squared up properly. So it's always best to take the time to measure those long border strips first and get them the correct length of your quilt. All right, I'm going to sew these and attach them together and put them onto the quilt, and I'll show it to you all pressed before